7 things that actually change the way my videos actually look. Let's get into it. So one of the number one things that I actually found that made a big difference in how my videos actually look from when I started as in the beginning till now was shooting in log. Now I know a lot of people say that, but shooting in log actually makes a huge difference when you're actually learning how to color grade. And I think that if you're a beginner that wants to learn how to color grade, I think that's one of the things you should absolutely do. Now, I will say shooting in log is not for everyone. It just depends on what you're using it for. So for example, if you're just doing some talking head videos, maybe you want to shoot in whatever the camera's natural profiles are. That's absolutely fine. But shooting log is an advanced way to get better color, to get better at actual, doing video, because you don't want every video to look exactly the same. Every video's got a mood. And I think that this ability to be able to shoot log and get the full dynamic range of the sensor really does help. Every camera has a log profile nowadays in 2025. So I think that if you have the ability to learn how to shoot log, do it. But absolutely, I think shooting log is one of those. Figuring out your exposure is probably one of the very first things you should learn. I did not figure that out for about a year until I really started to really get serious about what exposure actually meant for what the product that I was actually trying to produce becomes. So when I had my Blackmagic 4K, they had false color. False color is a really great way to figure out what your exposure actually looks like, but not every camera has it. So there's waveforms, which some cameras have. They have vector scales. I'm sorry, not vector scales. They have, I forget what this other metering that some cameras use. I only use, waveforms, and I use false color, to be honest. But there is a lot of value to learning what your camera has to offer. So really dig into that setting and figure out, take some B-roll and figure out what looks like what. Even if you expose your natural color profiles in your camera the wrong way, it's going to look off. So you just want to make sure that you're somewhere in the middle where you can still retain some of the highlights and some of the shadows, if I may. So yeah, so definitely look into the exposure. It's super important. I know that they talk about like exposure triangles and all that other stuff. Just know that, it's important, and you should spend some time, probably a lot of time, on that specific subject when you first start your videography journey. Piggybacking on exposure, you really should know what your camera's native ISO really is. Your native ISO is where your camera's most powerful as far as the sensor goes and reading out to the sensor. So if you really want to get the most dynamic range and you want the best video, then you should definitely look into what your native ISOs are. Some of them are 800, some of them are 1,000. So I would just dig online and just look to see exactly what that is. So once you have your native ISO, say you're overexposed, I would then look into getting an ND filter and try to keep your native ISO actually exposed correctly. I personally use a ND filter pretty much all the time. This camera that I'm using right now is a Panasonic S5 Mark IIX, and the native ISO is 1,000 and 4,000, I believe. So I do sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. Like right now, I'm exposing at 1,000, but I'm also using an ND filter. Lights are at 100%, except my ring light here. That's just, probably 35%. But anyway, at the end of the day, you want to try to stay as close to that native ISO as possible. If you need to jump it to your next native ISO, if say if you have dual or triple ISO like some cameras have, definitely it makes a big difference in the shadows and even in the highlights. So that's another tip that I wish I would have spent some time on when I first started. I didn't even know what it meant. So, to be honest with you, it's one of these things you kind of learn on the fly until you realize what it actually does. As you start looking at your video and editing it, that actually makes a difference. 180-degree shutter rule. Everybody talks about it, and it's absolutely important. It's what gives, some of the videos a really cinematic look. So just make sure you're doubling your frame rate if you're using shutter speed or whatever. And if you're shooting shutter angle, just make sure you shoot at 180 degrees. Pretty basic, but it is important. So just keep an eye out for it. It's one of those, when you have a little checklist in the back of your mind when you're about to hit play or record, sorry, I would probably, check, is my 180 degree rule okay? Is my, how's my shutter angle look like? Or uh, what's my 180 degrees look like? Am I at native ISO? Am I overexposed or underexposed? Those are really, really important. So I have a checklist of about 4 things that I always think about. I'll actually post them down below for you to look at. It's just a quick little checklist, like, the 4 things that I look at every single time before I hit record. Let's get on to the next one. So another one that people overestimate is actually knowing your camera. It takes a long time to actually know your menus and know what each little button in the camera does. Figure those out early on. Don't change cameras, don't change systems, just work with whatever you have and just focus on learning that one camera you have. Once you figure out how to use one camera, it literally translates every single one. Yeah, the menus might be a little different and the way the camera operates is a little bit different. It might be a better camera, or it might be a worse camera. But at the end of the day, if you learn how to manipulate all the function of one camera, you will learn how to control any other camera. And that's coming from somebody who shoot Blackmagic, shot Lumix, I shoot Canon. I'll shoot pretty much anything, and I bet you I could get a good picture out of it just because I understand these rules that I'm actually giving you right now. Shooting in better codecs is another good, tip that I give anybody. At the beginning, I really didn't understand codecs, so I didn't understand what they actually meant. But once I did, I started seeing an actual difference in the way my videos look just because I was picking the better codecs to get some of the better looks that I was looking for. It retains better information. It's just basically more information that the sensor's actually capturing. That's really what the better codecs actually do. And you'll start noticing if you shoot raw, you're going to start seeing, it's 1,000 megapixels per second or whatever. So that tells you that there's that much information going into your video profile. Yeah, some of them take up a lot of memory in your computer or in your SD cards, but I say, depending on what the project you're shooting, I think that you should be shooting at the highest codec possible that your camera actually gives you. Now, if you want to talk about RAW, then you don't necessarily need to shoot RAW for everything. I don't shoot RAW for pretty much, I want to say 80% of what I do not shoot in RAW. 20% I do shoot in RAW because I'm looking for something else out of the actual, the video that I'm doing. So yeah, I mean, if I had a camera that just shot RAW, I would probably just shoot RAW. It wouldn't make a difference to me, but it's not necessary. So just look into what long op means, what HFAVC with like a Canon, what your intra, all intra looks like. Check to see what your ProRes looks like. I wouldn't advise anybody just shooting in ProRes and all the higher codecs unless you absolutely need to, but it is important to actually know what they do. Just remember, 422 10-bit is what I would advise anybody to shoot on. You could get away with 420 10-bit, but in which I'll show some samples of it and it looks just fine. But I could actually tell a difference when I'm editing in my computer, what the differences are. They're very slight, but they are there. Another cool thing that you should actually learn, which I just learned this, to be honest with you, after 5 years, hold on to your B-roll. Like, that is really important. I have been like deleting it all these years, and I look back at all the B-roll that I took all these years, and I'm like, man, that was really usable stuff that I could use for my videos now. So I would think that building a B-roll library should be necessary, especially when you're first starting out, because when you first starting out, I mean, let's be honest, we're shooting B-roll is what we're doing. We're going out there, we're taking photos of trees, we're taking video of this and that. No one's really in front of the camera for you at that moment. So if you could start building a B-roll library and start labeling it and keeping it in an SSD and build on it, you'll be able to pull from it for years to come. So yeah, I would absolutely hold on to it. Like, don't delete that stuff. Like, if you go out on a travel trip or something, get some B-roll from that travel trip. You don't even have to use it. Just make sure that it's in your library, because there's going to be a point in time where you're actually going to need it. And it's going to be important. Like right now, I'm gearing up to go to a trip in Arizona. And I know that's going to be my primary objective, is going to be get a ton of B-roll. So, and it's just because I don't only get to Arizona but every so often. So I want to make sure that if I ever talk about Arizona, that. I have something to pull from in the future. The last time I was in Arizona was about a year ago, and I deleted all my B-roll. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I needed more space in my SSD. I needed more space in my computer. Don't even worry about it. Just buy another SSD if you can. Put it in a slow SSD. Put it in whatever you have to keep it, but definitely keep it. So bonus tip, I should mention this. I think that if you're an amateur, if you're just starting out, that you should definitely shoot on the shadow side of whatever you're shooting at. So make sure that you're always backlit, that there's a light in between what you're shooting and, you know, and your subject. You know, I think it looks really cool. It always looks super cinematic. You're always gonna look at those videos and you're gonna say, man, that looks really good, because when something is backlit and you nail the exposure, it looks amazing. So definitely, you know, it's kind of like one of those little techniques that people talk about all the time, and it's really underestimated. I shoot a lot of daylight stuff. I don't do a lot of studio stuff. The only studio stuff that I do is for this and for my other business. And you know, controlled lighting, which I love, it's great, but you know, if I have to shoot something whenever I'm outside or whenever I am, you know, indoors, I'm always looking for that angle where the light is behind the subject. It looks really cool, and I think you should definitely not underestimate that one. And again, I'm Jose Hernandez. If you actually watch this video all the way to the end, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe if you want to watch more of this stuff, if you want to hear from an amateur and how I got started. And yeah, I'm out. Peace.